What happens when a simple question on live television slices far deeper than anyone expected? When a calm, polished Hollywood star suddenly finds herself standing on the edge of an emotional cliff, with millions watching and no script to protect her? What happens when the view goes from lively conversation to an unspoken wound that no one saw coming? Before we dive into this moment, one that left the studio in stunned silence and had social media spiraling within minutes, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit the like button, and comment below to join the conversation. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what unfolds next. The lights were soft that morning on The View, the warm golden wash that made every guest look a little gentler, a little safer. Emily Blunt walked onto the stage with her usual grace, calm smile, confident posture, the kind of presence that made the audience lean forward instinctively. She was there to talk about her latest film, a character-driven drama where she played a woman rediscovering herself after loss. A heavy role, but Emily handled heavy roles the way artists handle clay, with tenderness and fire. The hosts greeted her with applause and animated warmth, but even from the beginning, something felt charged. Maybe it was Emily's eyes, bright but tired. Maybe it was the way she clasped her hands together, fingertips trembling almost imperceptibly, as if she were bracing herself for something she couldn't name. Joy Behar leaned forward first. She always did. She loved to get straight to the soul of a conversation, and today, she seemed particularly intent on peeling back layers. "Emily," she said, her voice light but curious, "you've played a lot of emotionally intense characters, but this felt different. Was there something personal you connected to?" Emily smiled politely, the safe Hollywood smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think every actor brings pieces of themselves," she replied. "This role, she's someone searching for herself. I think we've all felt that at some point." The audience murmured softly in agreement. It was the kind of answer that wrapped things neatly, the kind that let the conversation move on. But Joy didn't move on. She tilted her head, studying Emily the way only someone with decades of interviewing instincts could. "But you," Joy continued, "you've had moments in your own life that mirror this character's pain. You've talked before about losing yourself for a while, emotionally. What was happening in your life then?" The studio shifted. It was subtle, hands tightening around coffee mugs, eyebrows lifting, bodies leaning forward, but the energy changed. Emily froze for half a second, a pause so brief most viewers wouldn't catch it. But in the room, you could feel it, a silence that carried weight. Sunny Hostin shot Joy a look, as if silently asking, "Are you sure you want to go there?" Joy didn't break eye contact with Emily. Emily inhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes when they're choosing between two futures. One where they dodge the question, and one where they walk directly into the storm. "Well," Emily began, her voice softer than before, "that was a very complicated time. Not something I talk about often." Whoopi leaned back, sensing the tension. Sarah gently shifted her cue cards. But Joy was still holding the line, still pushing. "What changed you?" Joy asked. "Was it fear? Loss? Something someone said? What was the moment that broke you open?" It wasn't malicious. Joy wasn't trying to hurt her. But it was too much, too fast, too deep. And suddenly, Emily wasn't sitting on a talk show anymore. She was remembering. Her hands tightened on her lap. Her eyes dropped, unfocused, as if replaying something only she could see. A tremor of vulnerability crossed her face, raw and unfiltered. The audience felt it. The room grew unbearably still, the way air stands still right before a glass shatters on the floor. Emily lifted her head. Her voice caught. "It's strange," she said, "how sometimes a single sentence, just one, can stay inside you for years." Joy blinked, realizing she had struck something tender. "You don't have to." "No," Emily whispered. I think it's okay." She looked out toward the audience, not at anyone in particular, but as if she were searching for a safe shore in a sea of faces. "When I was filming a project years ago," she said slowly, "someone told me I wasn't enough. Not strong enough. Not resilient enough. That I was too emotional. And it got into my head. It changed the way I saw myself. I felt like I was disappearing into the roles I played because I didn't know who I was anymore. It was the kind of confession that no PR team signs off on. The kind that comes from a deeper place, a wound someone has carried for too long." The crowd murmured softly, sympathy, shock, and ache spreading through the room. Whoopi leaned forward. "Emily, that's..." But Emily wasn't done. "And for a long time," she continued, voice trembling just slightly, I didn't talk about it because admitting it meant admitting that someone else had that much power over me. I didn't want that to be true. Joy swallowed, guilt flickering across her face. You don't have to relive this on TV. We can. Emily shook her head. I think maybe I've been holding on to it for too long. The studio lights reflected off her eyes, revealing a brightness that wasn't quite tears, but was close. The audience watched, transfixed. Even the crew had stopped moving. There are moments on television when the line between performance and reality disappears completely, when the camera doesn't capture a celebrity, but a human being standing exposed. This was one of those moments. Joy leaned back in her seat, finally understanding the depth she had stumbled into. The question she intended as probing curiosity suddenly felt like an intrusion too sharp, too invasive. She cleared her throat softly, almost apologetically. But the silence didn't break. Instead, it stretched, fragile and electric. Emily breathed in, steadying herself. She wasn't falling apart. She wasn't breaking down. She was unraveling something piece by piece. You know, she said quietly, it's strange how you can be loved by millions, but still remember the voice of the one person who made you feel small. A hush fell over the room, so complete you could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. Sarah looked away, visibly emotional. Whoopi pressed her lips together, choosing not to speak over this moment. Even Joy, who always had something to say, sat still, eyes softening with unexpected regret. Then, as if pulled by some instinct, someone in the audience murmured, "We love you, Emily." A few others chimed in, gentle voices breaking the tension like drops of rain on dry ground. Emily blinked, startled, and then she smiled. A real smile this time. Fragile, but real. That was when the cameras captured something extraordinary. A single tear slipping free from the corner of her eye, tracing a quiet path down her cheek before she wiped it away with a quick, embarrassed laugh. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to get emotional." But the audience erupted into warm applause, supportive, protective, like an embrace rising from every corner of the room. And just as the energy seemed to settle, Joy leaned forward again, not with sharpness this time, but with something gentler. "Emily, thank you for sharing that. Truly." Emily nodded, still recovering her breath. But no one in the room yet realized what was coming next. Because Joy had one more question, one she hadn't planned, one that slipped out almost involuntarily, one that would turn this emotional moment into something far more intense. And when she asked it, the room would change again. This was only the beginning. Joy Behar didn't mean for the next question to fall from her lips the way it did. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't rehearsed. It felt more like something that escaped, a thought spoken aloud before she could soften it, shape it, or pull it back. "Emily, who said that to you?" The audience froze. It was the kind of question that shifted the air instantly, the kind that crossed an invisible line. You could feel the tension snap tight, like a rope pulled too far. Even the camera operators hesitated, glancing toward the producers behind the glass wall, unsure if they should push in for a close-up or pull back. Emily blinked. Once. Twice. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Sunny inhaled sharply. Whoopi muttered under her breath, "Oh boy." Sarah half turned toward Joy, eyes wide, silently begging her to reel the moment back in. But the words were out, on live television, with millions watching. Emily didn't speak at first. She looked down, her fingers curling around the fabric of her dress. Silence hung in the air like a held breath. Another second passed, then another, until the quiet became unbearable. Joy leaned back, regret already settling across her features, as if she, too, realized she had stepped somewhere she shouldn't have. "You don't have to answer that," she added quickly, her voice softer. "Really, Emily." But Emily lifted her head. Her voice wasn't steady anymore. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't the polished tone of a celebrity doing press. It was something raw and unguarded. It was someone I trusted. The audience murmured. The kind of murmur that rises from the chest, not the throat, concern, sympathy, curiosity wrapped tightly together. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes gentle. "Emily, you really don't have to go deeper into this if it's hurting you." But Emily shook her head. Not in defiance, more in acceptance. As if she had carried this weight too long, and now that the seam had cracked, she could either let the truth spill out, or spend the rest of the interview trying to shove it back in. "I'm not going to name them," she said quietly. "But it was someone I worked with. Someone who, at the time, I believed saw potential in me. Someone whose approval mattered more than it should have." A subtle gasp rippled through the crowd. Emily continued, voice trembling but resolute. We were filming a very demanding project. I was exhausted. I was struggling. And during one scene, I just broke. I couldn't get the take right. I kept stumbling. And afterward, he pulled me aside. Her eyes drifted away as if she could still see that hallway, that dimly lit corner of her life. He told me that maybe I wasn't cut out for roles that required real emotional depth. That maybe I should stick to lighter things. That I was too fragile to carry a story that demanded strength. The audience reacted with a soft, collective, "Oh." Emily pressed her lips together, fighting the quake in her voice. I think he believed he was helping, giving me tough love. But all I heard was that I wasn't enough. That my emotions weren't a strength, they were a flaw. Joy exhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a moment. She placed a hand over her heart, remorse etched across her face. Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. It's okay, Emily cut in gently. I know you didn't. But then, unexpectedly, the tone shifted again. A man in the front row called out softly, You're stronger than you think, Emily. The room erupted into supportive applause. Warm, comforting, almost protective. Emily smiled, just barely. Thank you, she said, her voice a whisper swallowed by the sound. But the moment wasn't done with her yet. Sarah, looking delicate and cautious, leaned forward with a softer question. When something like that happens, how do you rebuild yourself after? Emily paused, considering the weight of the question. How do you rebuild yourself? She repeated. Slowly, messily, quietly. She took a deep breath. For a long time, I pretended it didn't affect me. I hid behind characters, scripts, performances. But eventually, it catches up. And you realize you're not rebuilding for the cameras or the critics. You're rebuilding for yourself. Joy nodded gently. Was there a moment when you realized you were healing? Emily's eyes softened. Yes, there was. The audience leaned in, hanging on her every word. It was during a different project. A small indie film, nothing grand. But there was a scene where my character breaks down. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just quietly. And when I finished that take, the director came up to me with tears in his eyes. He told me, that wasn't acting. That was truth. She exhaled, voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, I felt seen for something I had always been ashamed of, my vulnerability. The audience clapped again, gentler this time, emotional, moved. And then, just as the room settled into that delicate, heartfelt atmosphere, Joy did something no one expected. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing with curiosity. Emily, forgive me if this sounds too personal, but when you say vulnerability, do you mean emotional vulnerability or something deeper? Something that went beyond work? The question sliced through the air like a blade. The audience gasped. Sunny shot Joy a sharp look. Whoopi's head snapped toward her with a mix of disbelief and irritation. Even Sarah flinched, her hand frozen midway through lifting her mug. Emily stared at Joy, eyes wide, startled, wounded. Time stood still. Joy realized instantly she had crossed another line. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered. I thought. But the damage was already done. Emily's face tightened. Not in anger. Not in shock. But in something far more heartbreaking. Hurt. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was small. Barely audible. That's a very complicated question. Silence swallowed the room whole. A silence that felt colder, heavier, and far more dangerous than before. You could feel the moment shifting beneath them. Like the floor tilting. Like the conversation slipping into territory no one had prepared for. And then, with the eyes of millions watching, Emily Blunt finally revealed the part of her story she had never spoken aloud. Not to the media, not to interviewers, not even to her fans. A truth that would change the tone of the entire interview and send shockwaves through the studio. This was the moment where the emotional unraveling became something deeper. Something no one on The View had been ready for. Emily's breath trembled. The kind of tremble that comes from a truth someone has kept locked away for years. Her fingers tightened around each other, knuckles paling as she stared down at the table, gathering the courage to speak. The studio sat in suspended silence, as if the entire room instinctively knew that whatever she was about to say mattered. When Emily finally lifted her head, her eyes glistened, not with theatrical tears, but with the raw vulnerability of someone stepping into the open without armor. When I say vulnerability, she began softly, I don't just mean emotional. I mean everything. My confidence. My sense of worth. My belief in myself. There was a moment in my life when I didn't feel safe. Not emotionally, not mentally, not even in my own skin. The audience reacted with a hushed wave of shock. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. Another pressed a hand to her chest. Joy, realizing the gravity of the moment she had triggered, whispered, "Emily, you don't have to." But Emily shook her head, silencing her with a gentle firmness. "No, I think maybe it's time." Whoopi's expression softened instantly, her tough exterior melting into something protective. Sunny's eyes glistened, and Sarah leaned forward, hands clasped, as if silently lending strength. Emily inhaled, steadying herself. "Years ago," she said, "during a very demanding period of my career, I felt trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and pressure. Everything I did was under scrutiny. Every performance judged. Every choice questioned. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I lost myself." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "There was someone in a position of power, who pushed that doubt deeper. Not intentionally cruel, but careless with their words. Careless with their influence. They made me believe I wasn't capable of carrying my own weight." Joy looked physically pained, guilt burning across her expression. Emily continued, speaking as if peeling back years of silence. "I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating properly. I stopped recognizing the person I saw in the mirror. And no one knew, because I didn't let anyone know. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to look weak." The audience sat frozen, the weight of her confession thick in the air. "And then," Emily whispered, "one day, I broke. Not publicly. Not on a set. Just in my kitchen. Alone. I remember sitting on the floor because standing felt impossible. I remember thinking, how did I let myself become this small?" Sunny blinked back tears. Sarah's eyes shimmered. Even Joy, typically unshakable, looked devastated. Whoopi leaned in, voice soft and motherly. "Emily, thank you for trusting us with that. With all of this. That's not small. That's human." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "I know that now. But at the time, it felt like the world was collapsing around me." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred, heavy with empathy. Then Sarah gently, cautiously asked, "So, what changed? What helped you find your way back?" Emily breathed out slowly, as if exhaling years of hidden pain. "I realized something," she said. "I realized that the version of me that person criticized, the emotional, sensitive, vulnerable version, was not my weakness. It was my strength. It was the part of me that connected to people, that understood characters, that made me an artist." She paused, her voice softening. "And I decided I would never let anyone make me ashamed of that again." The audience erupted into applause, warm, compassionate, deeply moved. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, laughing softly at herself. But then, just as the room began to settle, Joy cleared her throat. Her voice, shaky but earnest, broke through. "Emily, I hope you know, I wasn't trying to trigger something painful. I wasn't trying to push you into this. Emily held up a gentle hand. "Joy, I know. Truly. You asked a question. And maybe I needed someone to." Joy nodded, relief and remorse blending across her face. But then, almost instinctively, she asked the one question she probably shouldn't have. "So, if that moment changed you so deeply, has it changed the way you see the industry? The people in it? Do you feel betrayed?" The word betrayed dropped into the air with the weight of a stone. Emily's expression shifted. Not anger, not sadness, but something sharper. Something more revealing. "Yes," she said quietly. "I did feel betrayed. Because the people you trust, your mentors, your colleagues, your leaders, are supposed to lift you up. Not tear you down. And when they do, it doesn't just hurt. It reshapes you." A ripple of shock passed through the audience. Emily continued, her voice lowering. "But I also learned that sometimes the people we think are giants are carrying their own insecurities, their own fears. They project them onto others, onto us, and we mistake their shadows for our own weaknesses." Whoopi nodded slowly. "That's powerful. And true." Emily's eyes softened. "Eventually, I made peace with it. Not because what happened was okay, but because holding on to it was costing me more than letting it go." Joy, still visibly shaken, asked in a small voice, "If you could say something to that person now, what would it be?" Emily's answer came without hesitation. "I'd say, you didn't break me. You made me." The audience erupted. Cheers, claps, even a few whistles of admiration. But even in the applause, there was an undercurrent of awe and anticipation. Because there was still one question, one enormous, unspoken question, hovering in the room. One the hosts hadn't asked, but the audience was silently screaming for. Who was the person who told Emily Blunt she wasn't enough? And though Emily hadn't named them yet, the way she shifted in her seat told everyone watching that the truth wasn't far behind. The tension built again, the air thickening as all eyes fell on her. The room felt charged, like air right before a storm. Emily sat still, but her stillness wasn't calm. It was the quiet before a truth finally breaks free. Millions of viewers held their breath with the studio audience, sensing the climax of something raw, something rare, something real. Joy didn't speak. Not this time. No more probing, no more questions pushed carelessly into open wounds. She simply watched Emily with remorseful eyes, unsure if she should retreat or brace herself. Sarah shifted in her seat, whispering, "We're with you, Emily, whatever you choose to say." Emily nodded faintly. "I know." She swallowed hard. "Look, I want to be clear. I'm not here to expose anyone. I'm not here to drag someone publicly or create headlines." Her voice trembled, but her eyes had a new steadiness forming, like a flame regathering strength. "But I am here to tell the truth." She took a breath, sharp, decisive. "The person who made me feel small was someone who had the power to make me feel big. Someone whose words stayed with me long after they forgot speaking them." The room leaned in so deeply it felt like gravity itself shifted. "But I realized," Emily continued, voice soft but confident, "that naming them doesn't matter as much as naming the impact. Because the truth is, many people have someone like that in their lives. Someone whose words cut too deep. Someone they trusted who let them down." The audience murmured, emotional agreement swirling through the air. And then Emily said something no one expected. "It wasn't one person," she whispered. "It was a pattern, a culture, a way of silencing emotion in the industry that makes you believe you have to be steel all the time, not human." The shock across the room was palpable. Whoopi exhaled loudly, running a hand across her face as if finally understanding the full picture. "So," Emily continued, "when I rebuilt myself, I wasn't just moving past a single voice. I was moving past an entire expectation that said vulnerability was weakness." Sarah's eyes shimmered. Sunny nodded. Joy stared down at her hands. Emily breathed out, a long, aching release. "And I promised myself I would never let that happen again." The room erupted in applause, this time not just supportive but triumphant. People stood. Some clapped through tears. Emily's vulnerability had shifted the energy in the studio from tension to something like collective catharsis. But the moment wasn't over. Because with applause comes commentary. With commentary comes noise. And with noise comes fallout. By the time the segment ended, the studio was buzzing like a shaken beehive. Producers scrambled. Crew members whispered. The hosts exchanged looks, some concerned, some protective, some stunned. But Emily? She sat in quiet relief. "I feel lighter," she said softly, almost laughing through her exhaustion. Whoopi placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You did something brave today." Joy attempted a smile, still laden with guilt. "I'm sorry, Emily. Truly." Emily shook her head. "Joy, please. You asked questions. I chose to answer. And maybe I needed to." Joy's eyes glistened. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't," Emily said gently. "Not today." Before they cut to commercial, the audience rose to their feet for a final standing ovation. Emily pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed. When the cameras faded to black, the real storm began. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips of Emily's trembling confession circulated like wildfire. Hashtags ignited. Hashtag Emily Blunt Speaks. Hashtag The View Moment. Hashtag Hollywood Pressure. Hashtag Let Actors Be Human. Millions of views. Millions of comments. Some praised her bravery. Some demanded accountability from Hollywood. Some speculated on the unnamed figure in her story. Some debated whether Joy's questions crossed a line. News outlets scrambled to publish think pieces before others could beat them to it. Emily Blunt gets emotional on The View in raw, unfiltered interview. Joy Behar under fire for question that triggered emotional confession. Hollywood's hidden culture of pressure exposed again? Industry insiders started whispering. Agents, directors, actors who had once worked with her. Some privately messaged her support. Some publicly applauded. Some stayed silent, uneasy with the conversation now sweeping across the timeline. But amid the noise, something beautiful happened. Thousands of fans shared their own stories. Stories of teachers, bosses, family members, people whose careless words had left invisible scars. People who had doubted themselves for years because someone else told them they weren't enough. Emily's moment wasn't just entertainment anymore. It had become a mirror. It had become a movement. Back in her hotel room that evening, Emily curled onto the couch, watching the unfolding reactions with a quiet heaviness. Not regret. Not fear. Something like acceptance. She whispered to herself. It needed to happen. There was a knock at her door, her publicist, holding her phone with fresh analytics and trending lists. But Emily didn't rush to see them. She didn't crave the validation. She simply said, "Let's hope it helps someone." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it would. The day after the interview aired, The View issued a short statement acknowledging the intensity of the moment and commending Emily for her openness. Joy made her own post, humble, apologetic, and filled with empathy. But the industry buzz would continue for weeks. Writers, bloggers, podcasters, analysts, everyone dissecting that 1 hour of television. Because moments like that don't happen often. Moments of truth. Moments unscripted. Moments where a celebrity stops being an icon and becomes a human being again. Emily Blunt's emotional unraveling and her powerful reclaiming of her voice became one of those rare, unforgettable cultural moments. And Stage View had just told the story. Before we close this chapter, I want to hear from you. What do you think of Emily Blunt's emotional moment? Did Joy's questions go too far? Did Emily reveal something the industry needed to hear? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, dramatic stories just like this one. Your voice matters. Your perspective shapes the conversation. And Stage View is where these moments come alive.